see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Yeah, I was 5 years old when we left, so I don't remember too much. But let me just introduce this. And
Okay.
Hi, I'm Edwin Rutsch, and this is Dialogues on How to Build a Culture of Empathy. And I'm so excited to be talking with Diana Castle. Thank you for joining me.
Edwin, as I said just a few seconds ago, I'm just like, I'm so excited to be with you. I just feel like I'm meeting a brother from a long time ago.
Oh, great.
Really, you know, it's just a wonderful opportunity to have this dialogue. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and you even mentioned you had questions for me, so it sounds like it's going to be a real dialogue. It won't just be me asking questions, you know.
I'm dying. I mean, I'm really, you know, because what you're doing is so profound. I mean, you really are building a circle of empathy in the world. Just you're taking so much action. And I just want to find out how it all started. I mean, how did you get interested in empathy, and how is it that you began to create this incredible site? I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, well, I'd love to talk about that, but first I want to introduce you. That you know, I just came across your work because there was an interview you did with the Deepak Chopra well, and they interviewed you about your work in empathy and acting, and there was your website, theimaginedlife.com, and it's about acting as the art of empathic imagination. It says, which is a creative philosophy and practical application of your natural empathic imagination to the art of acting. And I said, I have to contact this person. So I'm really glad to, you know, connect with you on this and kind of hear about yourself and you know, how you got started with this, and I'll share some more about myself maybe a little bit later.
Well, I think, you know, how did we both get interested in just the topic of empathy? I mean, when I created The Imagined Life, empathy obviously has been a topic many people have spoken about for a long time, but I think it's more in the consciousness today than ever. A little bit of my background: I'm the daughter of a man who survived the Holocaust. And I was raised in the Deep South. So the combination of European parents in the Deep South in the 60s was a real pressure cooker of feeling disconnected, and as a child yearning so much for connection. I mean, you know, so much. I mean, what child doesn't want to have friends on the playground and feel connected to other children? And I was also in the South, as I said, in the 60s, so we were also going through a period of what they were calling desegregation, and I say they as if it's an us and them situation, but in that at that time, it felt like they were calling it that, and it was a challenging time, but I'm so grateful. I mean, I have such a sense of gratitude to my parents for introducing me to the arts. And you know, and that was the playground where I could find community and experience catharsis and collaboration, and people of all different backgrounds were coming together around a single mission to share a story and to, as Shakespeare said, you know, hold the mirror up to nature. And I think now it should be, you know, I mean, my little quip is hold the mirror neurons up to nature now. I mean, you've done a lot of discussing of mirror neurons, and I'm sure, you know, we'll get into that today, but yeah, to show scorn our own image. And so I went through an experience of such scorn, and I watched my father suffer, so I was very empathic because he never, you know, I was born thin-skinned, and so in the presence of his deep suffering, over the annihilation of his entire family.
Wow.
And his inability to, you know, he didn't have what today it would have been probably a lot easier for him to seek out support and community. So I love the arts because that's where I think it's a mini world peace.
So it's like, if I'm just, what I'm hearing here is that you know, you grew up in the Deep South and you're kind of feeling disconnected from the society, and that the arts was kind of this place where you could find that sense of connection and community then.
And not only community, yes, not only community among the artists who were behind the mission to share a story with a group of people, but the greater community of the group of people who walk in and we all laugh together, and we all cry together. So the greater community called an audience. And you know, I think, you know, of course, a lot of actors yearn for applause and they yearn for validation and approval, and a lot of the times as a young person, that's, you know, that's where the fuel comes from. But I think on the deeper level, who doesn't want to feel that connection with another person? I mean, who doesn't want to feel understood?
And we actually had started a dialogue before, but it crashed, so we're kind of doing take two right now. So we're just going to kind of pick up where we left off, and you know, we're hearing about your story about growing up in the South of a Holocaust survivor. Your father was a Holocaust survivor, and kind of how you connected to art as a way of connection.
Yeah, and so, you know, it wasn't just the connection of the people, you know, in the story, in other words, the other actors, the director, the crew, all the people that had gathered together to create, to share a story with a group of people called an audience, but it was also the greater connection, the heart-to-heart, life-to-life connection that was happening between the whole company that had collaborated together and the audience. So it was an incredibly euphoric feeling to make that empathetic connection and hold that mirror up to nature, you know, or those mirror neurons, I mean, you know, which we're going to discuss, I'm sure, later today. So yeah, it was a very profound beginning, and one that I'm very grateful for having. Very grateful to my parents, as I said in the crashed version. But we get that. But
yeah, they taught you the arts. You said they valued the arts, and they shared that with you.
They shared it with me, and my father used to read, you know, Shakespeare to me and Chekhov to me, and really opened my heart to the great writers. And my mother loves music, and shared, you know, opera and classical music with me, and used to play Chopin. And, you know, so I was really around two people who, I think the arts were a source of tremendous relief for them, because you can transcend and transform through the arts, you know. And I think that that's where my interest in empathy began, you know, under the pressure and challenge of disconnection, and through the gravity of pressure, challenge, obstacle, conflict, my real liftoff happened. You know, I don't know that I would have found such a deep empathic connection if I hadn't had such pressure. I mean, I think in a way, pressure and challenge and obstacle, these conflicts that we're experiencing between people, actually offer a deeper opportunity for connection. You know, when you think about a plane taking off, gravity pulls it down. So the more weight that the gravity has, the higher you can go in a way. And
I've kind of noticed that too, that you're saying that it's like if people who have felt deeply have felt deep sorrow and suffering, which your father would have experienced in being a Holocaust survivor, that having that deep, you know, that deep emotion of the pain also has some, gives you a deeper insight into life, and can also make other experiences more intense or something like that.
Yeah, more beautiful. How about you? I'm really interested in, because you're building this incredible circle and culture. And I know you grew up in Cleveland, or you were born in Cleveland, but from there,
yeah.
I mean, how did you get into this topic of empathy? Where did it happen for you?
Well, you know, this is, you were talking about, are both of your parents Jewish, or was it just your father? No,
that's another, they had a great marriage, but that's another source of two people from very different backgrounds coming together. My mother is from England. She's from London, and you know, Church of England, and met my father after the war.
Oh, the reason I asked about that is because you're asking about me, and you know, my parents were actually Germans during World War II, so they were in the East, and so you know, my mother tells stories of seeing the cattle cars filled with people being shipped to the concentration camps, and then at the end, towards the end of the war, they were in the eastern part, so it was the first part of the of Germany that the Russian soldiers came in. So, all the family on my father's side, they were all killed. He was, like hiding in the barn, and the soldiers came, shot everybody. And with my mother, it was, everybody, the women were all raped, and just kind of. So it's kind of the same story of this underlying kind of horrors of life.
And so you heard these stories as a child, and I've been watching a lot on your website and getting to know you, and I loved that quote from your mother about when you share your joy with others, it's doubled, and when you share your sorrows with others, it's halved.
Yeah.
Did you find that to be?
Well, she's always trying to get me to get married, and that was her phrase of why you should marry. Is that you got to get married because, and then the quote comes, And I've never been married, so it didn't work. What can I say?
Well, I think you're married to this profound mission that you have, and you make connections and intimate and committed connections with so many people.
Yeah, and well, I'm kind of wondering, where did the empathy part came in? You kind of sounds like you had like an experiential experience of the empathy, but when did you say, hey, this is what empathy is, this is how it works, I'm going to really focus my whole energies on developing, and exploring this empathy?
Yeah, how do I put this? When I first began, I was just enjoying storytelling and enjoying the experience of being part of a troupe of people who were sharing stories. And then I started teaching actors. And because I'm a natural empath, I think we all are, but I was already naturally empathic from my father's experience and my mother's experience. Just as I started to work with actors, they were reflecting back to me that we were, this shared experience, this mirrored experience. They felt understood, they expressed that, and emotionally connected. And I didn't start out to be a teacher. I didn't know I was a teacher. I started out just exploring, the arts as a child, and then started doing it a little bit in New York, and then started helping some of my friends with storytelling, and they would comment, that I was able to see things in story that they had not seen, and through a series of events, more and more people started coming to me, and I found out, oh my gosh, I guess I'm teaching this thing called acting, which I wasn't really interested in until I really discovered that acting is the art of the empathetic imagination. And when I woke up in the middle of the night. I was just calling it acting classes with Diana Castle. I didn't have a name for it. I was just life to life, heart to heart, one person at a time, doing the best I could to support them to share whatever story it was they were being asked to share with the world. And then I woke up in the middle of the night and literally, in my mind, thought, the imagined life, acting as the art of the empathetic imagination. I wrote it down, and the next day, that's what I started calling it. And that was a profound experience, just recognizing that what I was doing was not really teaching acting, but teaching the heart and the art of acting, which was empathy. And that play, this thing that actors do, which is storytelling, play is what Meryl Streep says. It's imagined possibility. So, wow. I mean, an actor is uniquely asked on a daily basis to accept and agree to alternative interpretations of life. That's what they do. They're asked to accept, immediately exchange one interpretive framework for another one. And I find that to be an extraordinary process. And I've been doing it 25 years.
So, I mean, since that time, you've been using the word empathy and really kind of exploring the nature of empathy. And I'm kind of curious, like, how could it pop up? Had you been like primed for the word empathy or something? It was just like, it just kind of came up out of nowhere?
It really is true. I had not, it just came. It just came. And I mean, of course I'd been primed, because holding the mirror up to nature and showing virtue her own feature and scorn her own image. So this idea of Shakespeare's advice to the players and asking us to hold the mirror up, the mirror neurons up, and really speak to the potential in others. And I deeply believe that when we see the potential in others, we realize our own potential. So you were asking me, what's a metaphor for my work? And early on, the metaphor that has been a metaphor for my life and my work is Michelangelo's David. And the reason for that is there's a guy who wrote a book called The Art Spirit, Robert Henri, and he says the whole value of art rests in the artist's ability to see well into what is before him. So, if you can speak to the potential in someone else, to see well, to see the David through all the marble, then you become a Michelangelo. You become an artist of life.
So it's really like, if you're looking at me, you're seeing, a block, and then the empathy is really seeing more deeply into it, the David or the beauty or the deeper qualities that are behind what you're seeing initially. And it's that process of, which is actually the definition, the original word for empathy is feeling your way into something. So you feel your way into the block and feel and imagine more.
And I also think that it's because we have the block, that if the marble didn't exist, the David couldn't exist. So that there's this beautiful inherent reality, of poison and medicine, that there's this inherent capacity for the marble to be the very thing that delivers the David. So that we shouldn't shy, or I shouldn't shy away from, the things that exclude or disconnect, that it's through that we can actually find connection. And I think that when I, in my experience with students over 25 years, is that when I make a connection to the David and the marble, when I really make that connection and chip away at the marble that stands between me and you, I make a connection not just to your virtuous self or my virtuous self, but also to my scornful self. So, it's being an actor is not just about accepting virtuous parts. It's also about accepting scornful parts. So we don't only accept the side of us that's been annihilated. We also must accept the side of us that's an annihilator. And I think that the process of doing that with parts, with stories, helps, cognitive and emotional empathy, helps us with self-empathy. We become more empathetic or compassionate with ourselves when we see that I don't need to see myself in you. My job is really to see you in me. And if I can do that, if I can find my way to seeing your scornful self, your virtuous self, and come into communion with that, I'm going to have more compassion, not just for the other, but also for my own scornful self, because I'm not alone in it.
Yeah, so it's really kind of being a mirror to someone else in that sense. It's like allowing yourself to be a mirror, and it kind of being a mirror to others, you kind of see yourself, right, as well, I guess. In a sense, you're seeing yourself as the mirror, right? And right, you're like, oh, I see myself as the mirror too, reflecting who you are.
And when we bow to the mirror bows back. So there's this wonderful guy named V.S. Ramachandran, somebody have you had the conversation with him yet?
Not yet. He's on my list, definitely.
It's incredible what he's talking about. Of course, Marco Iacoboni, who you've interviewed, who's extraordinary, obviously, you know, a hero. But this idea that phantom, if I lose my arm, and then I sit across from you and it's my right arm, and I'm having phantom limb pain, and then somebody comes and massages your left arm, I get relief.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that it seems like we're separate, but the minute I lose my skin, I am you and you are me. The only thing that separates us is that.
Yeah, that's when I talked to Marco. That's what he was saying. I asked, you know, I'm looking at how do we build a culture of empathy? How do we raise the value of empathy in society and make it really a foundational cultural value? And for him, it was just that realization that you're talking about, how mirror neurons work, and that we are not separate in that sense. That as I'm waving my hand, that your mirror neurons, yeah, right, are firing and feeling that as well. So in a sense, the air and the space is only almost like a synapse between us, and so we are really we are not disconnected. And to have that realization, he thought was like one of the most profound realizations for fostering empathy.
I think that, yes, I think that, you know, this idea of saying hello myself, or hello my brother, or hello my sister, hello myself. I'm not meeting like an actor doesn't meet a part on the page, they're meeting a part of themselves. You know, this whole idea that I'm going to play a part. No, Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird, you never really know a human being until you walk a mile in their shoes. But walking a mile in another person's shoes doesn't mean that you give them back. It means that I'm going to walk a mile in your shoes, and I think that what we find out is that those shoes exist in our own closet. Oh, I walk a mile in your shoes. Wow, I didn't realize it, but I own those shoes. They may be in a darkened place in my closet, but wow, by taking that walk, I find out that we're not separate. And the importance of exchanging interpretive frameworks nowadays, of course, can't be underestimated. And I think that the culture of empathy begins with a willingness. I think that's the greatest challenge that we have today. It's not so much whether we can empathize, but it's whether we're willing to. It's a desire for connection, a desire to be that intimate, a desire to open our hearts to what another person might be thinking and feeling. And there's this tribe that I talk about a lot with my students with regard to willingness, because, you know, one of the challenges that an actor has is they don't get to pick what they empathize with. I mean, when you're Meryl Streep, you get to pick. You get your, you know, it's a child's game, and you get your childlike rights back. You get to pick your story. Mm-hmm. But most actors, they don't get to pick their story. You know, they get a phone call from their agent or their manager and says, tomorrow you're going in, you know, on Monday you're a mother, and on Tuesday you're a murderer. So you don't get the opportunity to pick the story, to pick what you're empathizing with, to pick, oh, I'm only going to empathize with virtuous parts. No. I mean, sometimes you have to empathize with scornful parts of yourself. So this part on the page is not on the page. It's in you, in me. And if the actor can empathize, then the audience can empathize. It starts with the empathetic journey of the actor and the director and, of course, the whole team. But I work with actors. The empathy of the actor for the written word and turning that written word spoken, which is a great challenge. So this tribe, the Moken tribe, in Bali, in Southeast Asia, they are gypsies. I don't know if you know this story. Do you know about the Mokens?
No, I don't know about them. I've lived in Bali, but didn't know about them. Yeah.
When did you live there?
Well, it was in the 70s. I traveled around the world for about 10 years and ended up in Bali in the mid-70s, and then actually got really interested in Indonesian language and Indonesia, studied it for a while, spent a couple of years there, and bought a sailboat, sailed around the northern part of Bali, but I didn't know about this culture, this like some subculture, probably some sub-tribe or something somewhere.
Gypsy tribe.
Gypsy tribe.
And I've got to find out. We've got to have this. I've got to find out about that, because that's, I mean, you know, you've traveled around the world and been on a sailboat, and met so many people from so many cultures, certainly that's been a tremendous influence, don't you think? Or
I was one of the big influences on empathy, and you were talking about how do we develop empathy, and I felt that the traveling, you know, I grew up as an evangelical Christian, you know, conservative. Everybody in the family still Republican, you know, votes Republican. And so, you know, this traveling really changed me in terms of, you know, I thought I had the answers to, the, you know, what life was about, and you know, just engaging with all these different cultures was really what I think really opened up my empathy. As you had, for you it was the arts, for me it was the travel, I believe.
in a way, I think of storytelling as traveling to other countries, traveling to the imagination, or this nation of images, alternative perspectives, alternative interpretive frameworks. And when you read a novel that's fictional, you get to time travel, you get to travel to other perspectives. When you read a script, when you read, you know, a screenplay or a play, and I don't think there's anything more important than cultural exchange. And you know, I'd like to become
imagination. Yeah. I was just thinking of my partner Joan. She talks about as a kid that she would take her brother into the wish machine, and it was like just you know, some chairs with a sheet over it, and they'd get underneath, and it would be the wish machine where they could travel around the world or around the galaxy or what have you.
It's that childlike innocence. It's that childlike willingness to travel, to be curious, to be open. That's that willingness I was talking about. And you know, we've developed this, you know, hard shell. And you know, travel's such a great way of softening and opening, and cultural exchange is very important. I'm hoping to do more of that in the near future with a play I recently directed. But in Bali, you know, how long did you live there?
In Indonesia in total maybe 2 years, in Bali 8 months maybe.
And what was it about Bali that most inspired? You know, Julie Taymor lived in Bali for a while, and it really inspired her work with The Lion King and her mask work.
Oh yeah, it was the exotic quality. It's so different from Western culture. You know, it was the first time I'd been in a kind of a Asian culture, and just everybody's wearing sarongs, and you know, the whole feel, right, of the humidity and the mystical quality of it, and learning the language. And I had children, those little children, and I would talk with them about learning. You know, they would be my teachers for learning Indonesian. And they were just like these great teachers. They had so much fun. We'd be just sitting at a local cafe and be talking to kids. I had my little dictionary, you know, and they'd be correcting me and kind of making fun of my mistakes and that kind of stuff. So it was just wonderful.
The children had a tremendous influence, it sounds to me like.
Yeah, it was just their playfulness. It's like, you know, we're talking about reflection. You're talking about actors, right? That the actors kind of stepping in the shoes, and you were also talking about the you know, there's this guarding of ourselves that we do. You know, maybe the fear and the anxieties and all that to kind of shut down that playfulness that we have, and that imaginative exploration. And the children are still, you know, kind of have maybe less of those fears and those anxieties, and more of that joy in that exploration. Yeah, and I imagine that's what you're trying to cultivate too. I would imagine that would be the thing to cultivate in your workshops.
That is the thing. That is the thing. To cultivate play and the play spirit. And the play spirit, you know, starts with the I am. I want to talk a second about that Moken tribe, because I think that relates back to, you know, your experience in Indonesia with the children and learning a new language, and also in a culture where, Asian culture, which has a greater sense of interdependence, that it is not just built on the spirit of independence, but that our independence is interwoven and we're in a web, a web that mutually supports. And a lot of Asian cultures talk about that and have an innate sense of that we're not, no man's an island.
Yeah.
And the Moken tribe, the gypsies in the Moken tribe, they have a story that had been passed down for generations, that when the cicadas stop singing and the water level gets to a certain point, that the big wave is coming. And this, they've survived for generations because of that story being passed down, the story of how I survived. And they go to a particular place, top of a hill with a tree. They know that tree, and that will ensure their survival. Well, on the day of the tsunami in Bali, the leader of the gypsies, the Moken tribe, recognized the cicadas had stopped singing and that the water level had risen. And he started running up and down the beach. The big wave is coming, the big wave is coming. And when he was interviewed by 60 Minutes, he was asked, he was down by the water, he was down in the water. Did you not tell the fishermen? Did you not, because the fishermen perished and your tribe survived, did you not share this story with the fishermen that the big wave is coming? And he said, yes, but the fishermen can only see the fish. And I think if we're not willing to exchange interpretive frameworks and we're only willing to see the fish, we're going to perish.
Mm-hmm. So it's really seeing how you. The part I see there is the storytelling as a way of communicating and holding kind of wisdom through the ages.
If we don't share our stories now more than ever, if we keep holding on to our fish, if we keep holding on to our map of the world, and we're standing in a completely different culture, we can perish. So
it's really like that holding tight, holding ourselves tight, and it's really how do we loosen up to start feeling each other's experience, and it seems that like then acting is the way of doing it. One way to kind of engage in that is start taking on these roles, start trying this out. And that's kind of like opening us up, then letting go of that tightness.
Completely, and also, for people who are more timid about it, just going to see a movie. I mean, the fact is that if the story, and I think that's why it's important for us to take a look at the stories that we're sharing, because, we want to share stories. I'm hopeful that we will begin to share stories less about our violent natures and more about our empathic natures, ultimately.
Yeah, that's a whole topic in itself, what our existing television and media is about. The one thing I did want to kind of bring in, in terms of acting, I've done some conflict resolution work, and in this process you have two disputants and then two mediators. And in the training, everyone takes on, practicing the different roles. So you actually do some, you become a disputant, you're given a script, and then you play from that script, like to be the disputant. And I was just so amazed how everyone was able to do that. There was no one who could not step into the shoes of this person and amazingly act out the conflict in relation to someone else. So it seemed, for me, it was like an insight that acting is really a part of our nature. We're kind of almost like wired for acting.
Definitely. We know that play, even the squirrels in my backyard play. We're born to play. We come into the world playing. Play is, we love imagining. We love using our imagination to fantasize, make up stories. It's just part of a necessity that we have for interconnection. And I think that, what you were saying just now really affects me, though, because, so many a non-actor has this willingness to walk in and say, I'm in a dispute with you, but I'm willing because I want this dispute to end. On some level, conflict resolution begins with a desire to end the conflict. And cultivating that desire, I think, is what movies and art, movies, plays, screenplays, fictional novels can cultivate.
And it would be more than maybe just a conflict between two people, but maybe inner conflicts as well, is what I was imagining there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when we step into the shoes of the person who has, who's being victimized or feels as though they're being not heard or not seen, I think when we step into those shoes and take on their interpretive framework and begin to experience what they, the way in which the patterns of thought, the patterns of conduct, the way we see, the way we think, the way we feel, when we step into those shoes and allow ourselves to have the experience, then we find out, oh my gosh, again, my own inner conflict between the person who is the annihilator and the person annihilated. That we're not one or other, that it's a both and experience. And I think that that's what conflict resolution through the arts can bring about, a deeper sense of self-compassion as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was wondering, you had started, you said, you had that insight about empathy, in acting, or, calling it the
empathetic.
Empathetic imagination, the imagined life. And how did you, from that point, I don't know, you said it was like how long ago, 20 years ago?
25 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, wow, you're really thinking about this a long time. So, and I mean, it's great because I've only been working on empathy about 5 years, kind of in a focused kind of way. So I'm a bit envious. If I would have discovered empathy like 25 years ago, I mean, it would have. I'm almost tearful thinking of how much I could have really developed, from that. But
weren't you already? Didn't you already discover empathy? I mean, isn't that what the travel was? Isn't that what your life's been about? Whether it was with every moment of your life up until the point where you created this website and started to do it in a conscious way to contribute to others. But hasn't it been all along? Every moment of your life, hasn't it been a preparation, empathetic preparation?
Yeah, it was. I didn't have the vocabulary for it, and I kind of miss having the vocabulary and kind of a, like I don't know what it is, a larger vision, or because when I did the travel, I had a friend that I met who was also kind of like a seeker and a traveler. And he was like really an empathic person. It's just like his life was really about caring and empathy. And so I really learned a lot, from him. And it kind of was one of the kind of, influences on getting that awareness more of empathic awareness. I didn't have the vocabulary for it, and he didn't either. He called it just love.
Yeah.
But
I think that, connection. Yeah. I don't always love. It's not always love. I think it's sometimes, it's a challenge sometimes to recognize one's own scornful self. But but to love that too, the capacity.
To see the scornful self, the mean self, the unempathic self, the part that kind of crushes and puts others down, or puts ourselves down, and how do we kind of open that up? How do we break out of that and do it in where we don't narcissistically beat others to do it? I'm going to pound you down so I can be bigger.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. That it's complementary, not competitive. That we complement each other. I mean, it is a marriage. I think it's an intimate relationship. It's a marriage of souls. It's a marriage of spirit. It's a marriage of heart. It's a, you know, heart-to-heart, life-to-life experience, empathy. And again, it's the desire, because that's the thing I work on just personally cultivating every day. You know, it comes naturally to me with regard to story and coming into communion with what a writer might talk about, empathizing with these beings on the page, and finding those beings on the page in the hearts and spirits of other people. But yeah, I think. Go ahead.
So, sorry. Your interview with the Deepak Chopra well, you talked with the people that were interviewing you about their intention.
Yeah.
You're saying, what is your intention? What is it? And you kept coming back to kind of tapping into their intention.
Well, that's half of the daily practice that I teach the actors. The first half is what I call the I must. And it comes from Rilke's first letter, Rainer Maria Rilke. Excuse me. Talk.
Oh, I have a little tea too. I have a cold. I'm just getting over a cold too, so we'll both pour a little bit here.
What kind of tea is that? I want to know.
This is Indonesian green tea. It was a friend, our neighbor, actually went to Indonesia for a trip, and he bought this at the airport.
I had a feeling. I was going to say it's an Indonesian tea. So the I must work. That's in Rilke's first letter. He's advising a young writer, and in that first letter, he writes that you must ask yourself in the stillest hour of your night, must I write? Now, he was advising a young poet. And if the answer comes back a resounding yes, then order your life according to that necessity. So certainly my experience of you so far is that you've ordered your life around this necessity to empathize and to contribute to the conversation about empathy and to the experience that we're all having with empathy. So I think an actor asks that question every day, must I contribute to the empathetic conversation through storytelling? And awaken to the greater mission, because I don't think if an actor has anything in life requires, I think, a deep-rooted mission that goes beyond one's own self-interest. And the mission to contribute to the experience of empathy, which happens every time an audience comes into the theater, every time an audience comes in to watch a movie. The I must. Am I ordering my life according to that necessity? I mean, it doesn't mean doing the laundry every day. You know, I must do the laundry. No, I mean, that daily mundane activity can be an expression, like the tea ceremony in Japan. It can be an expression of a larger mission. When you start washing the laundry and you're working on a story, and the laundry becomes the shirts of the person you're dealing with in the story, you know, that kind of thing. But my point is that every day, 20 minutes a day, I ask the actor to sit down and just get in touch with their real I must. I don't dictate what the I must is. What is your I must as a storyteller? If you've chosen to be a storyteller in the world, what is the I must? And for me, it's definitely, you know, how can I today turn my experiences